Awaken your spirit-chosen ones. The quickest way to be labeled crazy is to see the truth before everyone else is ready to admit it. That's the unwritten rule of life nobody talks about, but every chosen one knows too well. Long before the crowd catches on, you're already connecting dots, reading signs, and sensing shifts that others can't even spell out. And here's the funny part. People don't wait for proof. They hand you the crazy badge immediately, like you're collecting awards you didn't ask for. Meanwhile, deep down, they know you're on to something, and that's exactly what makes them nervous. Studies on human behavior show that most people react with denial, not curiosity, when faced with information that threatens their worldview. In simple terms, when you speak a truth that their minds aren't equipped to process yet, their first instinct is to reject you, not the idea. It's easier for them to believe you've lost it than to admit you saw further, thought deeper, and understood faster. And this is where your story gets interesting. Because every time they laughed, every time they rolled their eyes, every time they whispered, "Here they go again," life eventually wrote the exact script you predicted, line for line. Now they sit quietly, acting like they don't remember how loudly they doubted you. They do. Oh, they do. They're just hoping you forgot. There's a certain suspense to being the one who warns people before the storm, only to watch them blame the rain. It's almost comedic, like watching someone walk straight into a wall you told them was right there. Then they turn around offended, rubbing their forehead saying, "Why didn't you tell me?" This topic isn't just about being right. It's about the strange burden of being aware, intuitive, and spiritually ahead in a world that worships denial. It's about how your foresight became their fear and your accuracy became their embarrassment. They called you crazy because you saw the truth too early. And now that everything you said has unfolded exactly as you predicted, those same people are suddenly very, very quiet. Let's talk about why this happens and what it really reveals about you. Number one, they called you crazy because your clarity exposed their confusion. People didn't call you crazy because you were wrong. They did it because you were right too early. You saw things plainly that others were still struggling to understand, and instead of admitting they didn't get it, they tried to make you the problem. Your clarity became a threat, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it showed them the truth they were trying to avoid. When someone speaks a level of honesty that cuts through the fog other people rely on, the easiest defense is to label that honesty as madness. You weren't overreacting, overthinking, or being too deep. You were simply processing reality in real time while others were still emotionally stuck, mentally scattered, or spiritually asleep. You didn't need proof. You didn't need confirmation. You saw the pattern, felt the energy shift, understood the motive, and recognized the outcome long before it arrived. That kind of clarity isn't common, and uncommon things often scare people who depend on predictable thinking. Your insight exposed their uncertainty. You highlighted the cracks in their logic without even trying. You made them confront the fact that they weren't paying attention, and instead of appreciating that, they took it personally. It's much easier for someone to call you delusional than to admit they missed the obvious. It protects their pride, it shields their ego, and it keeps them from having to level up mentally. What they called crazy was actually your sharp awareness operating in a room full of blurred vision. You weren't trying to outsmart anyone. You just refused to pretend you didn't know what you knew. And that alone made people uncomfortable. They wanted simple answers, surface explanations, and half-truths that helped them sleep at night. You gave them reality. You gave them depth. You gave them understanding. And for people who weren't ready to grow, that felt like confusion being exposed in broad daylight. Now that everything you said has come true, their silence isn't just quiet, it's revealing. They weren't afraid that you were crazy. They were afraid that you were right. Number 2. Your predictions scared them because you saw what they were trying to avoid. The reason people labeled you crazy isn't because your predictions were wild or impossible. It's because they hit too close to home. You weren't speaking nonsense. You were pointing out realities they didn't want to face. Most people are experts at pretending everything is fine, at convincing themselves that what's happening around them is random or harmless. Then you show up, calm, precise and eerily accurate, and suddenly the illusion cracks. They see the future you predicted, the consequences they ignored, and the mistakes they were hoping would vanish on their own. That's terrifying to them, and fear always looks for a target. You became the target. You had the ability to read situations beyond surface appearances. You connected the dots others didn't even notice existed. You sensed the underlying tension, the hidden motives and the patterns that repeat quietly until they explode. People don't like being reminded that their careful avoidance isn't working. They don't like seeing someone else recognize the dominoes before they fall. Your clarity forced them to acknowledge what they were trying desperately to ignore, and humans naturally react to discomfort with judgment rather than gratitude. They were uncomfortable not because of you, but because they were confronted with themselves. Their ignorance, denial, or overconfidence was exposed without malice or drama, just plain observation, prediction, and understanding. That simple act of seeing the truth before they were ready made them defensive. Mockery, ridicule, or the crazy label became their way of escaping the weight of reality. Now, as time unfolds and every prediction you made comes true, they are left in stunned silence, wondering how you knew. They realize that what they feared most wasn't your mind. It was the mirror you held up to their choices. You weren't trying to scare anyone. You were just accurate, aware, and honest. And that's a truth so unsettling that some people would rather pretend it never existed than admit you were right all along. Number 3. People mocked you because your insight demanded accountability they weren't willing to give. The truth about being called crazy isn't about your words. It's about their reaction to your awareness. Your insight wasn't just sharp, it was uncomfortable, precise, and unavoidable. You noticed patterns, motives, and consequences that others deliberately ignored. And here's the brutal honesty. Most people hate being held accountable, even in thought. When your understanding exposed their shortcuts, excuses, and blind spots, it wasn't flattering, it was threatening. Your clarity forced them to face themselves, and they weren't ready. So, instead of reflecting, they mocked. They laughed, rolled their eyes, and whispered behind your back, because it was easier to discredit you than to admit they were wrong, lazy, or inattentive. Your insight shone a light on their inconsistencies, their unspoken intentions, and the areas of life they'd been avoiding for years. People have a natural instinct to protect their self-image, and when confronted with the truth, the defense mechanism almost always comes out as ridicule. Mocking you was their armor. It made them feel safe without actually fixing anything. You weren't trying to lecture them. You weren't trying to humiliate them. You were simply observing reality with a level of honesty and clarity they didn't possess. Your predictions, comments, and warnings weren't personal attacks. They were factual, precise, and rooted in awareness. But facts can sting when someone has invested so much in denial. Your insight demanded accountability, and accountability is uncomfortable. People avoid it at all costs. They would rather label you crazy than examine their own choices and actions. Now, when the outcomes you foresaw start to play out exactly as you said, the mockery fades. It turns into quiet acknowledgement, grudging respect, and sometimes even desperation. They realize that the crazy person they laughed at wasn't crazy at all. They were awake. And that truth hits harder than any insult, because it forces them to see that you were right, and they were the ones hiding from reality all along. Number 4. They resisted you because you shattered the illusion that they were in control. The reason people called you crazy often has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. Your awareness, your foresight, and your clarity made them realize something they never wanted to admit. They aren't in control. Most people spend their lives convincing themselves that they are steering the ship, making smart choices, and understanding the world around them. Then you come along, calm and confident, pointing out patterns, predicting outcomes, and seeing motives that they thought were invisible. That's not a compliment. It's a threat. When you speak the truth, it forces people to confront their own lack of foresight. They start to notice their missed opportunities, poor decisions, and ignored warnings. That's uncomfortable. And when humans feel uncomfortable, the first instinct isn't reflection, it's resistance. Your presence shatters their narrative. You show them in subtle but undeniable ways that the control they thought they had was an illusion. And instead of thanking you or learning, they label you as the problem. Crazy becomes the easiest word to throw at someone whose clarity highlights their insecurity. You weren't trying to dominate or manipulate, you were simply observing and stating what was evident to you. Your accuracy, your understanding, and your insight forced them to face realities they'd spent years avoiding. They didn't like being confronted with the truth that life was moving faster than they could handle, that consequences were inevitable, and that their carefully constructed sense of control was fragile at best. Now, when your predictions come true and outcomes unfold exactly as you foresaw, the same people who resisted you are left speechless. Their resistance was never about your ideas. It was about fear, ego, and the discomfort of facing their own limitations. They wanted a story where they were the captains of their lives, and you, with nothing but clarity and honesty, proved that their control was always a mirage. That's why they called you crazy, because the truth is never easy to face, and even harder when someone else sees it first. Number 5. When you spoke, you triggered their insecurities more than their logic. The reason people called you crazy isn't because your ideas were impossible. It's because they hit them where it hurt the most, their insecurities. You didn't just speak truths that challenged their thinking. You exposed gaps in their self-awareness, moments they had avoided reflecting on, and choices they were trying to justify. Logic isn't what people resist most. It's the discomfort of facing themselves. And when you show up with clarity, confidence, and insight, that discomfort becomes unbearable for those who aren't ready to look inward. You weren't trying to attack anyone, but your awareness acted like a mirror. People saw reflections of their own doubts, fears, and failures staring back at them, and instead of acknowledging what they saw, they projected it onto you. Calling you crazy was their way of protecting themselves from the truth you represented. It's easier to mock, dismiss, or judge someone than to confront the parts of life they've been avoiding. Your words triggered emotion before logic could even process the situation, and humans almost always respond to emotion first. Your insight went deeper than surface-level observations. You noticed intentions behind actions, consequences before they arrived, and patterns that were invisible to those around you. That level of understanding isn't common, and most people aren't prepared to handle it. Their ego gets bruised when someone else can see the things they deny, and their first instinct is to discredit the source rather than accept the message. That's why laughter, ridicule, and skepticism often come before acknowledgement. Now, as your predictions unfold and every truth you voiced becomes reality, those insecurities resurface, but in silence. They realize that it wasn't madness to know what was coming. It was clarity. Your voice didn't threaten their logic. It threatened the lies they told themselves to feel safe, smart, and in control. That's why they called you crazy. You weren't wrong. You were simply more aware, more observant, and far braver than they could admit to being. Number 6. You saw connections that their minds were too distracted, wounded, or ego-driven to recognize. What people call crazy is often just a word for seeing too clearly in a world that prefers fog. You notice patterns others miss. You connect dots they either haven't thought about or are too afraid to see. Most people live distracted lives, caught up in noise, drama, and routines that keep them comfortable but blind. Others are too emotionally wounded to process reality without bias. Some are too wrapped up in their own ego to accept that someone else can observe and understand what they cannot. And then there's you, the one who perceives all of it, quietly but accurately, long before the consequences hit. Your mind doesn't operate on assumptions or convenience. You watch energy, actions, and intentions, and you map the results before they arrive. That kind of awareness feels like magic to some, threatening to others. When people see someone connecting realities they can't even recognize, it challenges their sense of control and superiority. Your clarity exposes their blind spots, their missed chances, and the mistakes they've ignored. And since pride is often louder than humility, their first reaction isn't to learn or reflect. It's to call you crazy, because that's easier than facing their own shortcomings. It's not arrogance to see what others don't, it's awareness. You don't need their permission to perceive the truth, and that independence makes some people uncomfortable. They resist, mock, or avoid you, because your perspective forces them to confront realities they'd rather sweep under the rug. Every accurate prediction, every observation that comes to life, is a quiet reminder that you were paying attention when they weren't. Now, as time confirms your insight, the label crazy falls apart. They realize your so-called madness was simply vision, foresight, and understanding. What they dismissed as strange or impossible was just you seeing clearly while they remained distracted, wounded, or blinded by ego. Your clarity was never the problem. It was the mirror they didn't want to look into. And now that reflection stares back at them, undeniable, undeniable, and unignored. Number 7. They needed you to be wrong because your truth would have forced them to change. The real reason people called you crazy wasn't about your words. It was about what accepting them would demand. Your truth carried responsibility, and most people aren't ready for that. If they admitted that what you saw, predicted, or warned about was accurate, it meant they had to act. It meant they had to face uncomfortable realities, make hard choices, and possibly rethink everything they thought they knew about themselves or the world. Change is heavy, and humans instinctively avoid it. So instead of confronting your insight, they attacked it, dismissed it, and labeled you as irrational. You weren't trying to provoke or pressure anyone, you were simply stating what you knew. But your clarity forced people to confront the parts of life they were avoiding, and that's terrifying for anyone who's comfortable in denial. It's far easier for them to call you crazy than to admit they were wrong, slow, or unprepared. The moment your predictions started unfolding exactly as you said, their defiance didn't vanish. They just went silent, because silence is the only acknowledgement they can handle without facing themselves. Your truth was inconvenient because it exposed laziness, ignorance, or short-sightedness. People wanted comfort, excuses, and illusions that kept them feeling in control. You, however, offered neither. You were accurate, aware, and unflinching, which meant that if they accepted you, they couldn't hide anymore. The fear wasn't about your foresight, it was about their own inability or unwillingness to act in response to it. Now, as life validates your words and predictions, the irony becomes undeniable. The very people who needed you to be wrong are the ones scrambling to understand how you were right all along. Your crazy insight wasn't a curse. It was a mirror showing them the work they didn't want to do. And the truth is, being right when others resist it doesn't just prove clarity, it proves courage. You spoke it, you foresaw it, and now they are forced to watch quietly as the reality you warned about unfolds exactly as you said it would. Number 8. They dismissed you because you threatened the comfort of their group agreement. The moment you spoke the truth, you disrupted a balance most people were unwilling to challenge. Humans naturally seek comfort in consensus. Groups, whether families, workplaces, or social circles, have unspoken agreements. Narratives everyone pretends to believe so they can feel safe, validated, and in control. You didn't play along. Your awareness, predictions, and honesty exposed cracks in their collective story, and that was intolerable to them. They didn't attack your words because they were wrong. They attacked you because you threatened the illusion that everything was fine. When someone points out the reality the group is pretending doesn't exist, it forces people to make a choice, confront it or deny it. Most choose denial because change is uncomfortable, and admitting the truth means breaking the cozy rhythm they've built around excuses and half-truths. You weren't the problem, they were. You simply refused to lie along with them, refused to nod at stories that made them feel safe, and refused to bury the truth to protect fragile egos. That courage, that clarity, makes people uneasy, so they label it madness instead of confronting the reality it exposes. Your insight cut through pretense effortlessly. You didn't whisper or manipulate, you simply observed and stated what was happening. Your predictions and awareness highlighted what everyone else hoped to ignore. And the truth is, being right in a group that depends on denial is threatening. Your accuracy becomes a spotlight on their weaknesses, their mistakes, and their selective blindness. Mockery and dismissal are easy defenses because facing the truth would require reflection, responsibility, and change. And that's work most aren't willing to do. Now, as your words unfold exactly as you predicted, the group that once laughed or ignored you grows quiet. They realize the truth can't be silenced, and the one they called crazy was simply unwilling to conform to their comfort. The irony is sharp. Your clarity didn't destroy the group, it exposed their avoidance. And now, with time confirming your insight, their silence is proof that you were the only one paying attention while they were busy pretending. Number 9. Your intuition exposed agendas people wanted to keep hidden. The reason they called you crazy wasn't your vision. It was the fact that you saw through their carefully constructed masks. People hide motives, manipulate situations, and spin stories to serve their own interests, and most spend a lifetime hoping no one notices. Then you come along, calm, clear, and unshakable, and suddenly the smoke they'd been hiding behind dissipates. Your intuition didn't just pick up on obvious actions, it sensed the subtleties, the timing, the underlying patterns that revealed what they truly wanted. That kind of perception is threatening because it strips away their control over the narrative. You didn't need explanations, confessions, or proof. You understood energy, behavior, and intent in ways they couldn't articulate themselves. And that's exactly why they reacted with fear, disbelief, or mockery. They weren't afraid of being exposed to reality. They were afraid of being exposed to you. Your accuracy made them confront truths they had been quietly bending or hiding from others and themselves. It's one thing to lie to the world. It's another to have someone see right through it and call it out, knowingly or even silently. When your intuition picked up on hidden agendas, it disrupted their illusions of safety. The moments they assumed they could manipulate outcomes or keep secrets were suddenly transparent. Your words, actions, or predictions became mirrors reflecting their true intentions back at them, and most people don't like mirrors when they reveal more than they want. That's why your clarity was labeled madness, because admitting you were right would force them to face accountability, something far heavier than any insult they could throw at you. Now, as events unfold exactly as your intuition predicted, the ones who doubted you are left watching in silence. Their agendas, once hidden, are now clear for anyone paying attention, and your foresight is undeniable. You weren't crazy, you were awake, you were aware. And your insight didn't just predict the future, it revealed the truth people were desperate to keep buried. That's the power they feared, and that's why they couldn't accept it at the time. Number 10. They projected their limitations onto you because they couldn't imagine being that aware. People called you crazy not because you were wrong, but because your awareness made them confront the reality of their own limitations. Most humans operate within self-imposed boundaries without even realizing it. They settle into routines, comfortable thoughts, and narrow perspectives, convincing themselves that what they see is all there is. Then you come along, alert, observant, and unafraid to speak what others only think in whispers, and suddenly their small world feels exposed. Your insight, your foresight, and your understanding are foreign to them, and the easiest way for them to cope is to project their inadequacies onto you. When someone is awake to patterns, motives, and consequences that the average person misses, it forces others to question themselves. But admitting that someone else can see farther, think clearer, or understand deeper is painful for most. Their pride, insecurities, and ego are all at stake. Instead of grappling with the discomfort of their own limited awareness, they choose a simpler path, labeling you as crazy, irrational, or out of touch. It's a defense mechanism, a shield against the truth that they are the ones lagging behind. Your predictions, observations, and insights didn't just challenge their thinking. They highlighted what they were unwilling or incapable of seeing. And that's terrifying to anyone who relies on mental shortcuts and convenient ignorance to feel in control. You weren't trying to belittle them. You were simply functioning at a level they couldn't comprehend. That made them defensive, reactive, and eager to dismiss you. Now, as the reality you foresaw unfolds exactly as you predicted, their projection dissolves into silence. The crazy label no longer makes sense, because it wasn't about you. It was about them. They see now, too late for denial, that your clarity was never a flaw. It was a reflection of what they couldn't do for themselves: observe, understand, and act with awareness. You weren't limited, and that realization stings. Your insight wasn't madness. It was proof that you were awake while they were still learning to open their eyes. Number 11. Your confidence in what you knew was mistaken for arrogance, not accuracy. The truth is, people called you crazy because your certainty made them uncomfortable. When you spoke with clarity, foresight, and conviction, they heard arrogance instead of accuracy. Most people live in doubt, hesitation, and uncertainty, constantly seeking reassurance from others. When someone operates from knowledge, intuition, and awareness, it challenges the fragile comfort of their indecision. Your confidence wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about stating what you already knew, what your perception and understanding had confirmed long before anyone else could see it. Confidence is often confused with ego by those who are insecure. If you trust your observations, your instincts, and your judgment, it terrifies people who can't trust their own. They aren't threatened by the truth itself. They are threatened by the fact that you are unshakable in it. That unshakable energy shines a light on their uncertainty, laziness, and indecision. Instead of facing their discomfort, they project it onto you, calling you arrogant, overbearing, or crazy. They attack the messenger because the message itself would force them to acknowledge what they've ignored for far too long. Your confidence wasn't about being louder or more forceful than anyone else. It was quiet, grounded, and unavoidable. You didn't need validation because your awareness spoke for itself, And that's the thing that unsettled people the most. Someone who knows what they know, sees what they see, and predicts what they will only later understand. It's not arrogance to act with certainty when the evidence, intuition, and understanding are aligned. It's clarity. Now, as life unfolds and every prediction or insight you shared comes true, the same people who labeled you arrogant are left speechless. Their disbelief fades because results speak louder than labels. Your confidence wasn't arrogance, it was proof. Proof that you saw farther, understood deeper, and trusted yourself in ways they weren't ready to accept. They called you crazy because the world isn't used to clarity that comes without hesitation. You weren't arrogant, you were awake. Number 12. They tried to shame you because they couldn't decode what your spirit naturally understands. People called you crazy not because your insight was flawed, but because your awareness operates on a level they can't even begin to comprehend. Your intuition, perception, and understanding flow naturally from who you are, and that kind of clarity is intimidating to people who rely entirely on logic, habit, or social cues to navigate the world. When someone exists in a space of deeper perception, it exposes the limits of those around them, and the easiest reaction for many is shame. They attack, mock, and dismiss what they cannot decode, hoping that by discrediting you, they can preserve the comfort of their ignorance. You didn't acquire your understanding to impress or confront anyone. It's a natural part of your being. You notice motives, predict outcomes, and sense hidden dynamics without overthinking it. That effortless awareness makes people uncomfortable, because it reveals how much of life they're missing while they convince themselves they're in control. They try to shame you because acknowledging your insight would force them to recognize their own lack of awareness, a truth most are unwilling to face. Shame becomes their weapon because it distracts from the reality that they are behind. They whisper, laugh, or label you as delusional, hoping the noise will drown out the truth you carry. But the thing they don't realize is that your spirit doesn't need approval, validation, or recognition. Your awareness continues to operate, silently proving its accuracy, whether they accept it or not. Now, as your foresight unfolds, and everything you predicted comes to pass, their attempts at shame lose power. The same people who tried to undermine you are left confronting the undeniable reality that you were right all along. Your so-called crazy nature was simply your spirit functioning at full capacity, seeing what others were blind to and understanding what they couldn't. You weren't mistaken, arrogant, or delusional. You were awake, aware, and aligned with a level of perception they could only wish to access. Their discomfort was never about you. It was about their inability to meet your level of awareness. Number 13. Your truth hit them too early, before life humbled them enough to understand. The reason people called you crazy isn't because your insight was flawed. It's because your timing was ahead of their readiness. You saw what was coming, understood the consequences, and spoke the truth while they were still caught in denial, ignorance, or self-deception. Most people need experience, failure, or harsh lessons to reach the clarity you possessed naturally. When your observations and predictions arrived before they were prepared to receive them, it threatened their sense of control, comfort, and understanding. They couldn't process your words, so they dismissed you, mocked you, or labeled you irrational. Your awareness wasn't aggressive or intrusive, it was simply ahead of the curve. You recognized patterns, motives, and outcomes that others were blind to, and that made your clarity uncomfortable for those who were not ready to face reality. They weren't rejecting your accuracy. They were rejecting the responsibility your truth implied. To admit you were right would have meant acknowledging their own blindness, mistakes, or inaction. That is a hard pill to swallow, and instead of swallowing it, they projected fear, doubt, and ridicule onto you. People often interpret early insight as madness because it challenges the pace of their learning. They live in a world where lessons are painfully earned, and they aren't equipped to recognize foresight when it arrives naturally. Your words and predictions were simply too advanced for their current level of awareness, and their reaction, mockery, dismissal, or derision, was a defense mechanism. Now, as life unfolds exactly as you predicted, those same people are forced into a silent confrontation with the truth. They realize that your crazy was actually clarity, foresight, and understanding. You weren't mistaken. You were aligned with reality before they were ready to see it. The irony is sharp. Your timing may have felt too early, but it proved one undeniable fact. They were the ones behind, and you were the one who saw the path clearly all along. Number 14. They call you crazy until they need your wisdom to clean up the mess they created. There's a strange irony in life. The same people who dismissed, mocked, or labeled you crazy are often the first to come looking for your insight when reality hits them hard. You were called irrational, paranoid, or over the top because you saw what they couldn't or wouldn't see. You warned, predicted, and observed while they laughed or ignored, and when the consequences finally landed, they realized your madness was actually foresight. Life has a way of validating clarity, and suddenly the one they scorned becomes the one they desperately need. They never admit it immediately. Pride and ego keep them silent, forcing them to navigate the fallout on their own for as long as possible. But the truth you spoke can't be undone, and the patterns you recognized don't wait for apologies or validation. When chaos erupts, when mistakes compound, and when their illusions collapse, they turn to the very person they labeled as crazy. Your foresight becomes a lifeline because, unlike them, you anticipated, understood, and prepared for what they couldn't. This isn't about revenge or superiority. It's about awareness. You were aligned with reality while they were lost in denial, distraction, or ignorance. Their need for your guidance isn't proof of your ego. It's proof of your clarity and vision. The irony is biting. The same energy they resisted now becomes the energy they must rely on to fix the very situations they caused. It's a reminder that wisdom and foresight are rarely recognized until consequences make them unavoidable. And here's the final truth. Being called crazy in the moment doesn't diminish your insight. It enhances it. Time always reveals the accuracy of perception, the inevitability of foresight, and the value of understanding what others ignore. They may have doubted you, laughed at you, or tried to silence you, but the reality is undeniable. You were right, they were wrong, and now the very clarity they resisted is what they need to navigate the aftermath. Your so-called crazy wasn't madness, it was vision, and history always sides with vision in the end. The journey of being called crazy, mocked, or dismissed is never easy, but for the chosen ones, it is a mark of clarity, awareness, and vision that others simply aren't ready to handle. Every prediction, observation, and insight that once drew ridicule now stands validated, proving that your understanding was never flawed. It was simply ahead of its time. You weren't overreacting, paranoid, or imagining outcomes. You were awake in a world still half asleep. Your foresight exposed insecurities, revealed hidden agendas, and challenged illusions, forcing others to confront realities they weren't prepared for. What makes this journey extraordinary is not just that you were right, but how you handled it. You didn't seek approval, you didn't need validation, and you didn't allow ignorance to distract you from truth. Time has a way of vindicating clarity, and now the same voices that doubted, mocked, or dismissed you are silenced, witnessing the accuracy of what you saw long before the rest of the world could. Your so-called crazy insight was actually courage, awareness, and the rare ability to perceive what others cannot. Remember, being ahead of the curve comes with its challenges, but it also comes with unmatched power. You see, understand and navigate life in ways most people never will. And that is what makes the chosen ones truly exceptional. Your truth doesn't just come to pass, it shapes reality around it, leaving lessons for those who doubted and inspiration for those who are ready to awaken. If this message resonates with you, make sure to show some love. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that cut through the noise. Like this video if it hit home, comment your thoughts or experiences down below, and share it with anyone who needs to hear that being crazy often just means being awake. The world may resist, but your clarity will always stand the test of time. Stay awakened, chosen ones.